back to Bauconomics. Today we're going to talk about the production possibilities frontier. Sometimes it's called the production possibilities curve. What the production possibilities curve is it's a boundary line that we create that helps us determine the perfectly efficient use of resources by an economy, usually by an economy. You can do it for an individual, for a company as well, but usually we do it for an economy. So when we set up a graph with our PPF, we have to make some assumptions. Because if we're talking about a 1 month period of time or a 1 year period of time, we have to hold some things constant in terms of the amount of resources that we have. We have to assume they've stayed the same. That's not realistic, but it's an assumption we have to make. We also have to assume that technology has stayed the same. Again, not a good assumption, but we have to sort of freeze the moment in time that we're in so that we can analyze one thing at a time. If we took all those things into consideration, it would be extremely difficult to talk about the PPF. So in this case, let's say this is a 1 year period of time, and our economy produces two basic categories of goods, capital goods and consumer goods. What are capital goods? Remember, capital is what we need to make so that we can make other things. So it's things like factories and equipment and vehicles and heavy equipment and things like that. And then we have consumer goods, and that's the stuff that we buy at Walmart, that's the stuff that we consume on a regular basis. And so we make some combination of these goods in every economy, because if you don't keep making capital goods, you can't keep making consumer goods. But you need consumer goods for people to live on a day-to-day basis. And so what we have here is our PPF, and our PPF is this line right here, this curve, if you will. And every point, including the points on the axes, are going to lie along our PPF. Any point here is a viable, efficient combination of consumer goods and capital goods that we could produce if we were being perfectly efficient with our resources. Now the fact is, we are usually not perfectly efficient with our resources. I don't know a single economy that is. So many times, we are not producing at a point in water PPF, but we're being inefficient to some degree and producing below our PPF. So any point below the PPF is going to be inefficient. We are not using our resources up to their full potential. We are not using them effectively and efficiently. On the flip side, point up here, it's going to be unattainable, at least at this point in time. That doesn't mean we can never get there, because we likely will. It just means that right now, it is totally unattainable. It's impossible. It's not feasible to produce any point outside of our PPF. Now, the PPF will shift. It will move. It potentially can shift outward or inward. Now, a good, healthy, growing economy is going to see a very slow, steady shift of the PPF in the upward and outward direction. We call that economic growth. Economic growth is really an increase in our productivity capabilities. Why would the PPF shift to the right or shift up and out? Well, things like better technology. Things like we find more resources, we discover more resources. Something like that. Our population increases. Any of those things could increase our PPF or move it in the rightward direction. What might decrease our PPF? Well, it does happen. It does happen. It happens in times of civil war. It happens if we deplete our resource supply and we simply don't have any resources left. If people, our labor, are leaving the country in great numbers, we can see a decrease as well. So we can see the PPF shift in each direction for a number of different reasons. That's not what we would expect to see in a good, healthy, growing economy. We would expect a slow and steady increase to the right. Now the shift isn't always equal. It doesn't shift equally on the consumer end, on the capital end all the time. Sometimes we can see it shift more towards the consumer side or more towards the capital side, depending on what kind of resources we're discovering, what kind of technology we've come up with in order to help us increase our productivity or increase production. So the PPF is just a really basic tool that we use to determine how far from efficiency we are operating. Clearly, we can't operate outside of efficiency. We have to operate inside of it, and most likely we are to some extent. So that explains the PPF and why we use it in economics. I'll see you next time on Bach-onomics.